The rain fell on London in that particular way it does in autumn. Not quite a downpour, but a persistent, cold drizzle that seeped into the bones of everyone caught without an umbrella. Tourists, huddled in colorful plastic ponchos, shuffled along the railings of Buckingham Palace, their cameras clicking against the gray stone. They were all there for the same reason, to witness the stoic, immaculate pageantry of the changing of the guard. Among the crowd, pressed against the cold metal barrier, was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her name was Amelia, and she was visiting London from a small village in Cornwall with her grandmother. While the adults around her jostled for the perfect photograph, Amelia's entire world had narrowed to a single point of focus, the guard standing directly in front of her. He was a foot guard, a member of the King's Guard, resplendent in his scarlet tunic and the iconic towering black bearskin cap. To the crowd, he was a symbol, like a moving statue, a part of the spectacle. To Amelia, he was something else entirely. He was a real-life soldier, a protector, the most magnificent thing she had ever seen. Her eyes, wide with innocent wonder, traced the polished brass of his buttons, the perfect crease in his trousers, the way the rainwater beaded on his stout black boots and dripped from the brim of his bearskin. The guard, whose name was Lance Corporal William Davies, was acutely aware of the little girl. From behind the disciplined mask of his duty, he could see her. He had been standing at his post for nearly an hour. The cold had long since seeped through his wool tunic, and the weight of the bearskin was a familiar, heavy presence on his head. He was trained to ignore the chatter, the flashing cameras, the occasional shout from a tourist trying to make him laugh. His world was reduced to a set of precise rhythmic movements and an unwavering stare fixed on a point in the middle distance. But the little girl was different. She wasn't trying to provoke him. She wasn't even talking. She was just staring, her small face a picture of pure, unadulterated awe. He could see her grandmother beside her, an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair, pointing at the palace gates and explaining something, but the girl wasn't listening. Her attention was solely, intensely on him. For a few minutes, it was a silent, respectful standoff. Man and myth. Soldier and child. Then, Amelia noticed something. On the guard's left hand, which was held stiffly at his side, she saw a small silver ring on his little finger. It was a simple band, but it gleamed softly against the white of his gloves, and beside it, on the pristine white fabric, was a tiny, intricate, embroidered flower. It was so small, so personal, a secret detail hidden within the grand uniform. A wave of pure, childlike empathy washed over her. This wasn't just a statue. This was a person. He had a ring. He had a tiny flower on his glove. He must have a name. He must have a mummy and a daddy. He must get cold. He must get bored. Just like her. A deep, compassionate need to connect with him, to acknowledge the person behind the pageant, welled up inside her. She couldn't shout. That would be rude. She couldn't reach out and touch him. There was a railing in the way, and she knew that was probably not allowed. So she did the only thing she could think of. She raised her own small, chubby hand, her fingers bare of any rings, and with her other hand she pointed to her own little finger, right where his ring was. Then, with the most serious expression a 6-year-old could muster, she gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was a signal. I see you. I see your ring. I see your flower. I see you. For Lance Corporal William Davies, the next few seconds stretched into an eternity. The world, which had been a blur of gray sky, wet pavement, and distant chatter, and suddenly snapped into sharp, high-definition focus. The signal was so unexpected, so profoundly human, that it bypassed all his military training. It didn't trigger a security response. It didn't register as a distraction. It resonated in a place untouched by drill sergeants and operational procedures. He saw her small pointing finger. He saw her earnest little face. And in that moment, he was no longer just Lance Corporal Davies, a cog in the grand machine of the British Army, as he was simply William. The ring on his finger was his grandmother's wedding band, the only thing he had of hers since she passed away 2 years ago. The embroidered flower on his glove was a silly, secret good luck charm his younger sister Lily had sewn on before he left for duty that morning, whispering, "So you don't get lonely, Will." The disciplined mask, honed over months of brutal training at the Infantry Training Center in Catterick, began to crack. He felt a prickle behind his eyes, and a tightness in his throat that had nothing to do with the cold. The protocol was absolute. You do not move, you do not speak, you do not acknowledge the crowd. You are a symbol, not a man. But in that singular moment, the symbol felt an overwhelming urge to be a man. He couldn't wave, he couldn't smile. That would be a catastrophic breach of conduct, a viral video waiting to happen, a potential mark on his record. But he had to do something. He had to acknowledge her. And he had to let her know that her message had been received. With a monumental effort of will, he allowed his gaze to drop for a fraction of a second. His eyes, which had been fixed on the gray London skyline, met hers. It was a direct, unguarded look. In that fleeting glance, he poured every ounce of gratitude and shared humanity he felt. "I see you too. Thank you." Then, the miracle happened. His body, trained to absolute rigidity, betrayed him in the smallest, most beautiful way. The little finger of his left hand, the one with the ring, twitched. It was a minuscule, almost imperceptible movement. To anyone watching, it was nothing, a trick of the light, perhaps a raindrop causing a shiver. But to Amelia, it was everything. It was his reply, his signal back. A radiant, sunshine-bright smile broke across her face. She had done it. She had reached him. She tugged excitedly on her grandmother's sleeve, pointing. "Gran! Gran! He moved! He moved his finger for me!" Her grandmother, who had been busy consulting her guidebook, looked up just as the guard's finger twitched back to its rigid position. She saw nothing. "Did he, love? That's nice, dear. Now let's get a picture before he marches off." But Amelia knew what she had seen, and so did William. The moment was broken by the sharp, clear notes of a flute and the rumble of a bass drum. The relief guard was approaching. The ceremony was moving into its next phase. Now the old guard, including William, was about to be marched back to Wellington Barracks. As the new guards took their positions, a sergeant major with a voice that could cut through steel barked a series of commands. "Guard! Slope arms! By the left! Quick march!" The crowd applauded as the old guard fell into step, a perfect column of scarlet and black. William's body moved on autopilot, his boots hitting the wet pavement in perfect unison with his comrades. But his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the silent exchange over and over, the little girl's face, her pointing finger, her nod of recognition. It was a moment of pure, unscripted connection that meant more to him than any parade or official commendation ever could. As the column marched along the perimeter railings, heading for the gate, William knew he had only one chance. He couldn't look back. That would be a clear breach of drill. But he could look sideways. As his trajectory brought him parallel to where the little girl and her grandmother were still standing, he allowed his eyes to drift to the left for a single, permissible second. She was still there, pressed against the railings, her small hands wrapped around the cold metal. She wasn't smiling or waving. She was just watching him go, a quiet solemnity on her young face. As their eyes met one last time, William did the only thing he could. He gave her the tiniest, most formal nod imaginable. A nod that could be explained away as a natural movement of marching, but to Amelia it was a farewell, a promise. Then he was past her, marching through the towering black gates of the palace, which swung shut behind the column with a dull, final clang. The crowd began to disperse, the magic of the ceremony over for another day. Amelia's grandmother took her hand. "Come on, Amelia. Time for lunch. We can get a sandwich at that nice little cafe in St. James's Park." Amelia went willingly, her hand small in her grandmother's. She didn't say much as they walked through the park, watching the ducks on the lake. Her grandmother, sensing her quiet mood, didn't press. Finally, as they sat on a bench, sharing a cheese and pickle sandwich, Amelia spoke. "Gran, do you think he gets lonely?" "Who, love?" "The soldier. The one with the big hat." Her grandmother considered this. "I suppose they must sometimes. Mark standing still for so long." "I don't think he was lonely today," Amelia said confidently, taking a bite of her sandwich. "Because I saw him, and he saw me." Her grandmother smiled, a little puzzled, but touched by the simple wisdom of a child. "Well, that's a lovely thought, my darling." Across London, in the stark, functional locker room of Wellington Barracks, William Davies sat on a wooden bench, finally removing the heavy bearskin cap. He ran a hand through his damp, flattened hair and let out a long breath he felt he'd been holding for an hour. His colleague, a burly guardsman from Manchester named Tomo, sat down next to him, pulling off his own boots with a groan. "All right, Davies? You look like you've seen a ghost. Tough watch?" William looked down at his hand. The simple silver ring glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. He touched the tiny embroidered flower on his glove, a gift from his sister. He thought of the little girl's face and her silent signal of recognition. "No," he said quietly, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time that day. "Not a ghost. Just a reminder." Tomo looked at him quizzically. "A reminder of what?" William carefully peeled off the wet glove, his movements slow and deliberate. He traced the outline of the tiny flower with his thumb. "A reminder of why we do this, of who we're supposed to be protecting. It's not just the queen, or the palace, or the country. It's them. It's the little girls who look at you and see a person." He stood up, tucking the gloves carefully into his locker. He would never wear this pair again. He would have Lily sew the flower onto a new pair, but he would keep these, a private, tangible memory of a rainy day in London and a silent conversation that had broken every rule in the book. He had broken protocol. He had acknowledged a member of the public in a personal way. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, or that it was the finest duty he had ever performed. The little girl with the earnest eyes had come to see a symbol, but she had left having given a lonely soldier standing in the cold and the rain the most precious gift of all, the gift of being truly seen. And in that one, frozen moment, surrounded by the rigid pomp of ceremony, that simple human connection was the only thing that mattered. The crowd saw a guard, the guard saw a man, and a little girl saw them both.